Welcome to Geeks and Grounds, a monthly game club and weekly podcast where we play games and brew good conversation together. I'm your host, Jenny Wyndham,
And I'm Joel Thomas.
and you are in a very different location today, Joel.
Yes, for those savvy viewers, you're noticing what is, it looks like a closet, but is actually a children's therapy office.
Ew.
Hanging out with some fam these days, and
Nice.
my sister-in-law's been kind enough to put me in her office to work for the week. So we're recording live from Delta, Colorado.
Hell yeah. I was going to say, have you been tempted to explore some of the toys? Because I'm just looking at your background and I see sort of this construction looking outfit. I see fairy wings. Have you gotten to dabble and rediscover your inner child?
Everything looks like daycare toys.
Ah, yeah,
And
okay.
by that, I mean, like, it just looks like if you were to touch it, it would be sticky in a not pleasant way. And it might be totally clean and Lysoled, and I don't even know. But it's just. Okay, so for the savvy-eared listeners, I probably sound sick because I am. And I got it from my 2-year-old niece, and I just gotta say, I don't get to spend a lot of time with my niece and nephew. Getting sick because you're hanging out and like hugging a little 2-year-old child who's like really snotty and whatever, there's something so very real about that I mean, I know we got like some parents that listen, etc., so like you're probably like, get over it, loser, or whatever. But for me, who like I haven't gotten sick from a family member in a long time, and it's just like, I don't mind. Like, I don't mind it. It's like, oh my gosh, it's like so sweet that this little 2-year-old child wants to give me a big hug when she's feeling sick, and it's okay if it makes me sick
Aw,
because of that.
yeah.
So that, yeah, there we go. A little bit of that for you today.
Special kind of love right there.
Special kind of love.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you're feeling up to hanging out with us today. For folks who are new to the podcast, every week we really have two main portions. We have the pastry case where we talk about kind of just the grab bag of topics, whatever is on our minds, maybe bigger topics on the industry, just what we've been playing or what we've been doing outside of playing the monthly brew. And then we have the month's brew where every week we go into a bit of a deep dive and spoiler cast on a section of the game that we're playing. So if you're new, we have been playing American Arcadia for the last couple of weeks. This is week 3, and so we're gonna be getting into a lot of detail this week on
Hmm.
the mid section of the game. So I always like to say, if you haven't played and you really want to save yourself from spoilers or haven't yet listened to the other episodes, do go back a couple episodes, maybe start from the beginning. It's a good way to, I think, in some ways experience the game as an audio let's play in some ways, because we do go through pretty chronologically.
Yeah.
um and if you are playing, use this as cliff notes. Use this to help either guide your thinking after you've played or perhaps prep yourself ahead of playing the game, to think about maybe some of the topics we bring up and maybe some of the ones that we've missed, because we're only 2 people. We only record this for about an hour and a half tops, and we certainly don't cover everything. So, with that in mind, let's go to the pastry case, and see. You've been traveling, so have you had a lot of time to either binge watch something or play anything, Joel?
You know, I've binge watched quite a lot of things with the family. A lot of Paw Patrol. A lot of there's a new Hot Wheels TV show. But in terms of
Oh,
like things that I'm interested in, I watched the first episode of the new Fallout show,
heck
and
yeah.
I gotta say the first episode was very good. I cannot wait to get through the rest. We'll have a link in the show notes.
Hmm.
But man, I in the world feels exactly right. I was not a huge Fallout person. I've only played Fallout
Okay.
4. But just in terms of like the retro futurism, which is also part of American Arcadia a bit,
Hmm.
exploring kind of the grossness of the post-apocalyptic world, and like the really pleasant like narrator thing and that voice that you get sometimes. I'm really digging it. I think it's translated to screen really well so far in the first step. So I'm
Oh,
excited to keep going.
awesome. Okay, so as someone who hasn't been super deep into the lore of Fallout, you're feeling like really accessible, it's really interesting. What is the okay? This may seem like a silly question, but for folks like me who know Fallout essentially as an aesthetic and as a brand, I don't necessarily know like the plots or what are the driving
Mm.
forces in Fallout other than like apocalypse, which, you can kind of get a general vibe. What is like the main plot that's introduced in at least the first episode?
Yeah, generally the Fallout series revolves around the fact that like there were these vaults set up around maybe the world, maybe America, that some people got access to during a nuclear apocalypse,
Mhm.
and many people did not get access to. And so typically in the games, and there's obviously like very different storylines and starting points for each, but
Right.
generally a lot of them are like you somehow emerge from the vault. Sometimes you're like frozen, and it's several hundred years later. Sometimes, as is the case with this show, you are and this is like opening scene stuff. You're like a descendant of the people who live in the vault,
Mm,
and so like you've never seen the outside world. Uh, and usually there's like some mission. A lot of times it's like recovering someone, a child or a lost
okay.
connection that you're trying to get in touch with. But you get a lot of like really interesting factions out in the world. You have kind of this like religious militant group that I want to say it's called like Brothers of the Steel Watch or something. That could be wrong. I apologize. Don't flame me in the comments. Which is kind of like basically like a heavily militarized force. So like when you think Fallout and you see like those giant mech suits that people
Mm,
wear, like
mhm.
10 feet tall mech suits, like they are often associated with that group. You have like mutants that are like crawling around, and you have like normal people just trying to like stay alive in settlements.
Okay.
And so just in the first episode, they kind of introduce a lot of those different groups in different ways, and just very entertaining, extremely gory. So if you're gore sensitive, I will give you that as a maybe this show's not for you.
Mm.
But so far it's translated really well.
Okay. Yeah, I know everyone's been super positive on the show. I haven't had a chance to watch it yet. Um or at least I haven't made the time to. I've had a lot of
Hmm.
opportunity, but I have not made the time to watch it yet. So, I plan on catching up to it and watching it because I think what I've been really excited about is having a show that other people are watching and that's coming out kind of on a weekly basis again. I think there's something about that zeitgeist of like everyone following the show at the same time and talking
Yeah,
around the water cooler about what's going to happen next. And so I think I want to be a part of that.
I totally agree. And like I'm kind of uh hit and miss on the weekly eps versus
Mm.
the binge model. So like for example, I don't know if you've been watching X-Men 97, the like cartoon that they released.
I have not, but I have only heard good things about that too.
Not only is it like did the first like episode or two like really hit on some of those nostalgia points, and like I really enjoyed it. The most recent episode, I cried maybe like 3 different times. Just like
Wow.
extremely emotionally gripping, real world shit. Has a lot to say about what's happening with the genocide in Gaza right now. Like
Wow.
it's
Is
it's
it is
incredible.
it episode 2 by any chance? Or
5.
5? Okay, because someone I was talking with a friend, and he said he posted, and then I messaged him about this, and he was like, "Episode 2 hit, like, a season finale." Like, and we're only on episode 2. And so, I think he had just started watching it just a few days ago, and so now I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I need to catch up on that too." Because I was admittedly, because I really loved, like, some of X-Men, which is such a
Mhm.
weird statement, but, like, considering I am not a superhero person, there were aspects of X-Men that I was like, "Something about this feels more interesting to me than a lot of superhero narratives," like, characters specifically, because they have more like, there's more variety, the arcs are more interesting, I don't know, just interesting. And so, hearing about 97 come out, I was like, "I don't know if this is just, like, a remake or if they're going to do something totally different. What's really intrigued me about 97 is some of the discussion I've seen, just like a thread on some of the magical girl comparisons. Like, I guess there's a transformation sequence that looks and draws from Sailor Moon. And honestly, that really got me intrigued because I was like, the way that the person was doing the thread and talking about the significance of this magical girl transformation sequence and how it connects to some of the themes that they're bringing in X-Men. I was like, this is interesting in a way that I did not anticipate. So maybe
They
I'll check it
oh,
out.
I mean, here's what I will say. Like, first of all, episode 2, the ending of episode 2, oh, yes, also got me. And like, yes, definitely a great episode. The thing that they've done from like a what they have done really successfully in this show compared to a lot of other Marvel shows is a
Hmm.
lot of other Marvel shows are either heavy in the 3D animation world, like the What If series, in a way
Hmm.
that like I really don't like, or there's just like classic American cartoons, like the Spider-Man show that came out a couple years ago.
Right.
Uh, this show pulls heavily from anime style action sequences,
Okay.
and like in a way that's like honoring and like intentionally recognizing it. So like the magical girl transformation, I want to say it's like episode 4.
Okay.
Uh, wow, like absolutely there, absolutely intentional. But like in general, it's got some of the most entertaining action sequences I've seen out of an American cartoon since maybe Avatar. So for whatever that's worth to anyone.
That is very high praise. That is worth quite a bit, honestly. Um,
What have you been
I'm
getting into, Jenny?
trying to look and see where. Oh, it's on Disney Plus. I may have to not get your account because we absolutely would not share an account if anyone from Disney is listening. But just
But if only there were some way
oh, if only
for
there
you
was
to
some way
watch.
for me to find a way, but we'll ponder that.
Mm.
No, what I have led a far less interesting life in terms of what I've been consuming, I feel like, compared to you. I played Stardew Valley for most of the last week. I think there have just been a lot of like life changes coming up that probably will be either just be announced or like in a day after this podcast post will be shared. And so like that life change is good, but it's just been a lot for me to deal with and process. Um uh, the IRS has given me a fun loop to work around. I didn't do anything wrong. My tax person and the IRS did stuff not right. And so I'm having to pay the price of emotional and actual phone labor where I'm having to sit on hold, and that's been draining. And so when I have times that are just so draining like this, even though it's not like bad, it's just a lot, I just dive into Stardew Valley, and I have been putting way too much time. I don't even wanna look at the number of hours I've spent in the last week in Stardew Valley because it's going to be embarrassing, and I just won't face it. That's all. I will say I'm really proud instead of choosing the normal problematic fave of mine, Shane. I know. If you play, I know. At least it's not Alex, is what I'll say. But normally I go for Shane, who is not the most he's not the healthiest choice, I would say, of characters to
Okay.
romance. But I think I'm gonna be going with like Abigail or Maru or Harvey, which seem like they're gonna be a bit more like healthy choices. And I'm really proud of myself for that. So in game, I am growing. Um
Wow, real growth. That's real
thank you.
growth.
Yeah, I'm
I
really
have
proud of
heard that they
myself.
have like I don't know if it was through the patch or with some mods, but like
Mhm.
you can add like Baldur's Gate characters or Gojo from Jujutsu Kaisen. Have you seen any of
Yes, you
this?
can add that. This is like, I think community generated mods, that you can do. Honestly, I still haven't played like a full sort of, I haven't completed a full Stardew Valley like run essentially or file. And so
Hmm.
I, well, I also don't typically mod games, but I've always told myself I really want to complete like the full game before I add any mods to it, just because for me it makes, I don't know, I find it really important to play vanilla just for myself. Um, but yes, you can add, I've seen like people with Asterion like screenshots and stuff. So yeah, you can do that if you would like to add some Baldur's Gate into your Stardew. It's good stuff. But yeah, so a lot of Stardew. And that's honestly like I think I've been my partner, because we like to have shows kind of in the background as we like go about sort of what we do in the nighttime. A lot of the times like he'll be painting and I'll be playing Stardew. um, but we've had what you call it, the show Vikings on in the background, which is
Oh.
not a good show. I would not recommend it, to be very honest. I'm saying this that we're watching it. I would not recommend anyone else watch it unless you just need something in the background. It's gory. There's just a lot of like really unlikable, but not in like well developed unlikable characters. It's like these characters are just unlikable
Mm.
and flat. There's nothing interesting about them or what's happening. But yeah, it's just been a show to have in the background because we didn't know what else to put and we just fell on it. So
Eesh.
yeah, it's been kind of a bland week for me in terms of what I've been playing, reading, and watching.
I see, I
Yeah.
see. Yeah, I think I did one episode of Vikings, and I was like, I just don't think this is for me, and
No,
didn't continue.
it's not for me either. But like Grey's Anatomy, I just kept, at least Grey's Anatomy actually had a couple of decent seasons. But I will say it's kind of like Grey's Anatomy, where I'm like, well, now I've spent some time here and I kind of need to just finish it out. But I think, like Grey's Anatomy, it's gonna lose me because we're on season, I think, 3 or 4, and it's already just like it never made a lot of sense. It's completely off the rails now, and Grey's Anatomy lost me at around season 4 or 5, I think, and I think this is also going to be losing me at around season 4. So we gotta find a
I'm
new
so sorry.
new show to watch. Yeah, or at least new
X-Men
background show.
97 on repeat.
Honestly, well, it's tough, and I don't know if you're like this, but sometimes I just get so tired where I'm like, I don't wanna put on a good show because I wanna watch the good
Mhm.
show, but I'm so
Mhm.
exhausted, I need trash so I can, like,
Yes.
fill the void with noise.
That is so real, and, like, I'm at the point, like, I think I'm about to take a TikTok break because I
Mm,
love TikTok. I get so much out of it, but it's like I can't. It is hard for me to make it through an episode of anything at this point without me popping it up and being like, okay, but give me
mm,
that quick dopamine hit. So,
mhm.
little TikTok detox.
Yeah, detox. Yes. I actually just finished my detox.
Oh,
Because I had it off of my phone for about 2.5, almost 3 months. And I wasn't looking at it. And I re-uploaded it on my phone. And so I'm back on now. But so far I think I'm dealing with it better than I was.
excellent.
Thank you.
Yeah, someday I'll figure out this whole moderation thing, but it is not this day.
Not this day. All right. Well, this week has a few notable releases. I'll kick it off with Harold Halibut. If you again notable releases this week, just this week in indie games or games in general, just games we're interested in. Harold Halibut is coming out on April 16th on PlayStation, Xbox, and PC. This is a adventure narrative game about friendship and life on a city-sized spaceship submerged in an alien ocean. So, kind of like American Arcadia, this is
Hey,
a
yeah.
vibrant retro future world, and he's trying to find the meaning of the word home. I will say, I played the demo. I loved the claymation sort of almost Studio Leica, I guess, if you're familiar with
Mm.
their work. It has that vibe in terms of aesthetic, beautiful cinematic feel. Part of me did feel like it should have maybe been a movie instead of a game with some of the way the pacing
Oh,
worked. I'm curious, and again, this was just the demo, so I'm going to be curious when I play the full game. I want to see why was this made maybe a game instead of a movie. I think that was my biggest question after playing, but there's no doubt it is beautiful, really interesting story. It kind of reminds me of that. What's the M. Night Shyamalan one with the fish mermaid? Um,
oh,
with the guy or the person, I forget if it was a guy or
like
girl, but someone who bonded with a mermaid fish.
yeah, Lady in the Water was
Yeah.
the M. Night Shyamalan one, and then there was the uh Oh, the horror movie guy that did Pan's Labyrinth. He did The Shape of Water,
That's
which
what I'm
was,
thinking of. The Shape of Water. That's what I'm thinking
yeah,
of. Yeah, because it was the
Guillermo del Toro. That's
yes.
right.
It has
I
that kind of
love Shape
vibe.
of Water. God, that was such a good
You should
movie.
I would love to see what you think of this game because, again, I thought it was really beautiful. I think the story could be great, but it was so slow. I was like, "I almost wish this was a movie because I don't wanna necessarily play this. I just wanna watch this."
Oh,
So,
interesting.
yeah, I'm very curious if you end up playing it at all.
Yeah, that's super interesting, especially considering like we're playing a game that is also very movie-like, but I feel like it's been executing really well.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, yeah.
hmm.
Very, very different, I think. Like, I feel totally opposite about American Arcadia.
Got it. Next game on the list is Planet of Lana, April 16th, release date on PlayStation and Switch. A planet that used to be a place of undisturbed balance between human, nature, and animal has now become something else entirely. This disharmony that has been in the making for hundreds of years has finally arrived in the form of a faceless army. But this is not a story about war. This is a story about a vibrant, beautiful planet and the journey to keep it that way. I could use some of that motivation right now, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's really beautiful. I ended up playing because this is their console release. It's been out on PC for I think about a year now. I recommend it. I really liked it. If you love adventure, if you like Limbo, and sort of that kind of puzzle platformer game, this is very much on that style with like a brighter, lighter look, which I always am intrigued by. And then Life Eater is our last title for this week that we wanted to share. Also out April 16th. All of these come out April 16th. Oh my God. Um, what the heck?
What a
Let's
day.
space out our release dates, please.
So does this
Um,
podcast.
God,
So
so does this podcast. Dang. Honestly, who controls this? Someone needs to tell us to release on a different day. Um, so we're part of this crew. But Life Eater comes out April 16th on PC. Uh, the Steam description says if you don't sacrifice your neighbors, the world ends. Life Eater is a horror fantasy kidnapping simulator where you must become intimately familiar with your target's lives, one intrusive action at a time, and hope that the dark god you serve is even real. I will say this is a strange scaffold game, and I absolutely love everything Strange Scaffold has done. Um, I'm very excited for this. And this is a game where I think most people would not necessarily think, oh, Jenny would love a kidnapping simulator game. No, this looks good. So I'm very excited. So as
that
always, oh, go ahead.
that is really interesting. There was a movie that came out like a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, called
Mm,
Knock at the Cabin by M. Night Shyamalan, which hilarious that this is the second time he's come up. But that is like a similar premise of of that movie, where it's like a group of five people get like a vision that's like you have to go and convince this family to like kill themselves or allow themselves to be killed, or else the world will end. And so the movie is like this group of interlopers that come in where this family is, and
okay.
like as the world like begins to unravel outside, trying to convince them that they need to die in order to save the world. So kind of like an interesting similar premise there.
Um, was it good?
I actually liked it quite a bit. It was a Dave Batista was one of the was like the central
What?
uh character. You might consider him an antagonist in the movie. Hard to say, but like
Okay.
regardless, really showed off his acting chops. I thought it was a really interesting concept, and kind of like one of those movies that makes you think like, if I were in this situation and I were seeing the things that these characters were seeing, how would I respond?
Yeah.
Um, so
Interesting.
yeah, just interesting that we're seeing that storyline here.
Yeah, I'm not typically a Shyamalan. Am-
You're not a Shama head.
I'm not a Shama head. No, not typically, but that is a really interesting premise. So maybe I will take a look. Is it Shyamalan?
I have no
Is
idea.
that okay? I'm like I don't mean any disrespect to any fans of the director. I just genuinely don't know. I feel like
I
like I've pronounced it in so many different ways. I don't know which part was actually right and which part I was like joking around with. So
all I can
I've
hear is
confused
like
myself.
the the old like 90s movie preview voice guy being like,
Oh.
from the twisted mind of M. Night Shyamalan. And so
Okay,
that's
Shyamalan.
that's what I hear. I don't know if that's real. He might have been wrong. It's
You know
also a
what?
long time ago.
I say let's go with it. That sounds legit to me. So that's it for the pastry case this week. As always, if you've got questions, comments, either put them on, if you're watching on YouTube, you can put them there. If you are listening to the podcast on Spotify, you can also watch the podcast on Spotify, by the way. We do video
Ooh.
uploads there. You can, I believe you can comment on the post, and you can also always mention or add your thoughts in the Discord, which if you go to geeksandgrounds.com, there's links to all of that. So yay.
Let us know your favorite M. Night Shyamalan twist.
Yeah. There's really only one that I feel like is really genuinely good.
Oh, I
Really only
firmly disagree
one.
with that.
No.
Old school M. Night Shyamalan had some incredible twists.
Wait,
I
is
was all
old
about it.
school The Sixth Sense? Is that old school or
Sixth
is he?
Sense,
Yeah.
Signs, The Village had a great twist. I
Oh, I
thought
forgot he did
Unbreakable.
The Village. I did like The Village. Okay, so maybe he's had a couple.
Lady
He's
in the
had
Water is actually the one that I fell off. Like that was when I watched that. I was like, I think I'm good on old M. I think I'm good on
Yeah.
him.
I
So
see, I didn't maybe I'll need to rewatch Signs because I watched it just once, but I was very unimpressed with Signs when I watched it. Um, so yeah. I have not considered, but I did forget The Village was him, and I did like The Village overall. Uh, but yeah, I did
I
not like
think
Lady in the Water
I gotta say
or the
it's
plant
a
one.
yeah. What was that?
The
I
Happening.
remember that. I can't remember the happening. Yes, I gotta say, uh, because it always comes back here, and why not? Uh, Signs had an absolute chokehold on early 2000 Christians and youth group. Like, I cannot tell you how many times I watched clips from the movie Signs in youth group growing up. And yes, 100%. Like, because a lot of the whole thing was like, there were these signs that like characters experienced early on in their lives that helped them get through like the alien thing. And
Uh-huh.
so it was like, and then the Mel Gibson's character, I think, was a priest at one point who lost his faith. So like there was just it was just rich fodder. Like it was the same thing with like clips from the Matrix, clips from Lord of the Rings, any clips. People loved clips in the early 2000s youth group scene.
So wild. Again, a world that I never ever got to really partake in, so it's always
Got
fascinating.
to. Interesting
Well,
choice of
I guess
words.
it was never a part of. But yeah, so that is it for the pastry case. This month's brew. So again, we've been playing American Arcadia. It has been a wild ride. I will say this game has done a really good job for me of creating twists and turns that both feel very familiar, but also still leave me just like jaw dropped. What's happening next? Like when we stopped playing this week's section, I was just like, what is going to happen to Trevor by the end of this game? Like, this is amazing. Um,
My gobs, they are smacked.
my gobs are very smacked. I guess overall, what was your feeling by the time you finished this week's section, Joel?
Uh, I get that like little sense of pride because I think you and I were
Mhm.
able to kind of predict a few of those things, and that's
Yeah.
always such a good feeling
Mhm.
without it feeling like they dragged things out, which I think is
Yeah.
a really hard thing to balance. And because it's a game where like who knows how long some of these puzzles are going to take you, which I will get into. um
Yeah.
uh Despite that, like somehow they're still able to make those twists feel really organic and like
Mhm.
they aren't dragging out something that's super obvious for a really long time. It's like if you know the tropes and you're looking to be analytical, you can figure some of this stuff out. But if you're
Yeah.
just along for the ride and not like doing an hour long podcast every week about it, maybe you wouldn't see them coming because you wouldn't stop to really like settle into some of those
Mhm.
things.
But I will agree, like, even though there were things that we predicted correctly, which again, I love when that happens to a certain degree because it feels rewarding that if you pay attention, the game does follow the same train and same line of thought, but it
Mhm.
never felt like, "Oh, man, everything I'm getting is, like, right. Dang it, this is boring." It never, at least so far. We'll see, how it sticks to the landing next week, but I think this section of the game more than any other has felt really validating, like you said, and just really rewarding. And other than, yeah, a couple of chase sequences, I had such a blast playing. Um, so let's kick off.
Do you think, sorry, one
Yeah.
real quick. Do you think, let's pretend that you and I did not have like what I would consider a relatively high degree of like media literacy. So we spend time thinking about and analyzing tropes in media. Let's pretend that that was not true.
Okay.
I wonder how much of us predicting things is actually like kind of more anti-capitalist leftist tendencies that like we believe kind of the worst about companies, and a lot of the stuff that we're seeing is like most of the worst about companies. Like I wonder if my parents were to play this game who
Mm.
truly believe that bosses have the best interests of their employees at mind at all times and are altruistic, like would they see any of this coming?
Yeah, that's true. You know, we should invite one of your parents to come and play the game and give us their
Oh boy.
thoughts.
Yeah, maybe I don't think so.
We'll table that next time. We'll
Next
think on
time,
this.
next time.
Oh my gosh. So we start with the wonderful, again, the overlaid text every time. It just makes me so happy. Honestly, it's a really good marking point too for me. Like as a player, when I see that,
Mhm.
it instantly makes me go like, okay, I got to pay attention again. It's such like a nice hallmark for the player.
Yeah.
Without just being like chapter 1, chapter 2. It's really good, and it is fun to predict what's going to happen because again, the ways that they frame it, sometimes it foreshadows something, sometimes it fills in sort of like the immediate moment that you're in, and going nowhere is another great example. Side note, I did a couple last episode, I think 2 episodes ago, I forget, the D5, D4, A4, F sharp 4.
Mhm.
I found a just because I didn't, my piano's not like set up or anything, my keyboard. I found a website where you can play the notes, and I will say that those notes were the same notes you hear every time a broadcast starts in American Arcadia. A Vivian broadcast starts. So that was really
Oh,
fun because I found that on the internet. I'll link the thing so that
that's
you all can
great.
play it for yourself because there's a satisfaction in playing the notes and then just being like, "Ooh, I figured it out." Um, but yeah, so we actually, in Going Nowhere, we start with hiding stuff from our boss who is visiting. We're Angela, by the way. We're hiding stuff from our boss because she's trying to get into our house.
So many thoughts on this. What were some of your like first takeaways? Like to actually start with like the visceral. Like how did this scene make you feel?
Okay. So, again, we are Angela. We're in the midst of like trying to guide Trevor to drive out of Arcadia to get to the dome, essentially. And as we're guiding Trevor, we hear the knocks on the door and our boss is there. And my gut just clenched. Like everything, not just my gut, everything clenched. Um, and what I think they did a pretty decent job was immediately I was like, "Oh my god, my sticky notes." Because remember, way back when we were first visiting Angela's apartment, I was like, "What the heck? Like we have
Why are
so
you
many
leaving all this
sticky
evidence
notes."
out?
Yeah, like what are you doing? This is foolish. And my first thought was like, I feel like I don't know the house well enough. I don't know where everything is to hide because I immediately knew I had to like hide whatever I could. And I,
Yep.
the first time around, started picking off the sticky notes one by
Yep.
one. And I
Same.
was just
Yep.
like, no, God, no. Because I was like, I know this is not going to work. And I did not expect that Kendra would be able to force her way into our house. And
Yep.
I felt so upset and like
Yep.
violated in a lot of
Yep.
ways, like that physical space being violated, which we knew because we talked about how this is company housing. This is not just like Angela's own apartment. This is a Walton apartment.
That is so real. And it was like one of those things for me too that I was like, it felt so personally invasive.
Yeah.
And it's like, if you were to tell me that someone was tracking my movements, there was a camera following me around, I mean, I feel like so much of my life is on the record at this point that I don't know if I would super care. But like when someone can just walk into my house, for some reason, that just like hit me on a whole different level.
Yeah. It was the worst. And so I really enjoyed like the because again is there's this element of we already know Angela's not the tidiest person ever, and so even though there was a little bit, I had to go through this section I think 3 total times because there I first started with the sticky notes and that like was a bust. You cannot pick up all the sticky notes in time before Kendra busts into the house like the Kool-Aid man. um then I like thought I picked everything up, but there was like a folder on the table that I had missed because I hadn't investigated that part of the room well enough. And so I got it on the third time. But I think this sort of foreshadows an element a little bit where it got almost to the point where it was so much like, oh, I have to do this thing again. Um, that it started to take me out of it. Now, this instant didn't totally take me out of it, but it foreshadows what happens later on in this section of the game that we played because it got close. And it's a pattern that I've noticed.
This section took me over an hour.
Oh, no. What? What
I
got you
kept,
stuck?
because it's like, I didn't know all the stuff that was there. So it was like, okay, that whiteboard definitely has to get erased. These stickies definitely have to go.
Yeah.
A couple tries, like, okay, can I just do the stickies? No, there's no way to do the stickies. You have to
Yep.
find something else to cover them. Okay, there's a whiteboard. I have to erase the whiteboard. Cool. And the computer is on. Okay, I'm going to turn off the monitors. And literally, it was like every single time I finished one thing, I was like, okay, I think I'm good. Sure enough, another thing would come through. And sometimes it was like, well, I remember the last one was because like she makes a specific circuit.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember the last one was the book in front of the TV
Mm-hmm.
on the
Okay.
coffee table.
Yep.
And that one, I was so pissed because I made it all the way through. I was like, finally, I can stop hearing these same dialogue things. I can finally be done with this puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
She finds the book. It's like, God damn it. So I do it again, move the book off the coffee table. And that time I forgot about like the pamphlet in your
No.
desk. And so I did it again. So I kid you not, it was over an hour of me trying and failing, getting so pissed off playing this
No.
stupid part. And so to your point, it definitely took me out of it. It's like the combination of like the urgency
Mhm.
and like having to find things that you don't even know necessarily exist.
Mhm.
And yeah, like that did really take me out of it, and it made me
Mhm.
really frustrated. Like I got stuck on other puzzles too, but like this one, like it wasn't even a puzzle. Like there was nothing to figure out outside of like closing the blinds on the sticky notes. It was just like you have to find that this stuff exists and
Mhm.
remember every time like where those things are. Like, oh, that really got me. It
No.
really got me.
I think I was really rewarded, I think, by because I the first time because I don't feel like I had explored Angela's apartment like super well. And I can't remember if these items were there before either. Maybe they were, and like it's like they assume maybe if you explored it the first time through, you're not like you're familiar enough with the stuff that you know what maybe is like confidential and dangerous to have. But I panicked, and so as I panic ran through everything, I was like, "There's got to be something here." That like helped me just immediately find, and so I think I benefited from my like sort of chicken with its head cut off, just like I need to touch everything and see. And like I was touching so much that Angela would be like, "Nope, that's not a problem. Nope, that's not a
Yep.
problem."
A
And
hundred
then
percent.
Yeah, so I was able yeah, I did it in 3. That was kind of the limit for me. Wow, I did not know it took you that long.
It took me so long, and I was like I finished the puzzle and I just, like, stopped playing. Like, it was one of those
Yeah.
things where I was like, "I'm not going to stop before I finish this goddamn puzzle,"
Mhm.
but I'm also like, as soon as I finished, I was like, "I need to take a break and come in fresh because I know that I'm just, like, really frustrated with this game right now."
Yep.
Or
Really
with
fast.
myself
Yeah,
right
well,
now.
no, and I think there's an element of, like, I think they tried to do some signaling where it's like if you failed once, I think either Trevor or Angela is like, "Oh, the computer takes so long to turn it off, so I got to do that first." And then later she's like, "Ooh, I got to make sure, like any posters are taken down." So there's like lines that she'll say, but they don't happen. At least again, I didn't do it enough maybe to tell, but they don't happen super consistently. And so it's like if you don't even if you are paying attention, you may not get the signal that indicates what you should hide next. And so I think
Yeah.
there could have been better signaling happening on both like that auditory, but also maybe more on a visual level somehow. Um, but yeah, so that happened. Kendra came in, looks through everything. Basically, Angela's just like, nope, nothing's here. And Kendra's very suspicious. And what I love is Kendra's like, we're friends, right? Whenever a boss says that, especially in that specific situation,
Oh,
it's just
yeah.
kind of like, okay, yikes.
Kendra might be crawling up there for me on, like, most hated video game antagonists list. Like, she's climbing that ladder pretty hard right
Pretty close
now.
to Vivian, honestly, with how just much she's personally antagonized us.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, which speaking of Vivian, we then cut to some leaked footage from 2016, which I thought was amazing.
Brilliant. Brilliant,
Oh,
brilliant.
yeah. Could you dive into this for us, Joel? What is this
So,
footage?
you're getting kind of like a training or an onboarding session from Vivian herself about how to be an NPC, a non-protagonist character, which, first of all, chef's kiss for that. Like, absolutely brilliant way of separating, like, the subjects from just essentially actors that are in the
Mhm.
show. I thought it was so interesting because, like, I am really curious about, like, the logistics of how this world works, and
Mhm.
a major question for me was influences from the outside, things that could, like, give you hooks, if you will, like Trevor getting invited to parties that he just always turns down. Uh, the big thing
Yeah.
for me, one of the big reveals, though, was that, like, spouses and people who go on dates, a lot of
Yeah.
times, not a lot, but at least some of the time, those are NPCs,
Mhm.
and that really hit me in a way that was like it felt really nefarious
Mhm.
because it's like it's not enough that you're just putting these people in a fishbowl and letting them try to swim around and watching them. Like, that to me is egregious. But the idea that, like, you're also introducing things into their lives that, like, they think are authentic and genuine,
Yeah.
even from an interpersonal connection, that are not.
Mhm.
I can't even imagine, like, the trust issues that would cause for people that who, like, do make it out. Like, how do you anyway, so
Yeah.
you get, like, this onboarding speech, and it's very much like, "And I even worked as an NPC," kind of thing,
Yeah.
which is
I
like,
consider
again,
myself the first NPC. I'm like, oh my
oh,
God, Vivian. It's not about you. Oh, jeez. Even though you want it to be.
and then we get, yeah, so I thought that was a really fascinating exploration. I thought, again, like, this game's use of mixed media to, like, get things across, a leaked onboarding
Oh,
clip, just
so
brilliant.
good.
Like, I these creators are absolutely just brilliant. They're really smart people, and
Yeah.
I'm in awe of their approach here.
Yeah, I think one of the things, and this is a thread that I felt from the start, and this idea of reality TV, I think, is something I find just really personally interesting because, again, I watch reality TV. It's something that I pay a lot of attention to. I guess a decent amount of my own time attention to.
Hmm.
She says something along the lines of Ordinary lives are not interesting or not interesting enough. And I think it's a really interesting concept to think about just personally. I know, like, as someone who posts online, but I think anyone nowadays, because this idea of like having Instagram or TikTok or like Twitter, like having some sort of social media presence to show that your life is of interest in some way is like a really big pressure.
Oof.
And
Mhm.
so I think this idea of, oh, an ordinary life is not interesting enough to warrant attention. That's the line that honestly gave me pause and chills. And I wrote it down because it's, it feels like a sentiment that is very of today. And I really don't like it. Like the idea that
Oof.
you have to, like, is the Instagram, I guess, the Instagramification of life, where it's like you only post the prettiest things, you only post the most interesting things, because why would anyone pay attention to what your life actually is? You know, the mundane things. And I think that's also very insidious in its own way. And I've been thinking a lot about that in particular.
St. Vincent had the Digital Witness single and album, and that's kind of the premise of that song is this like, what's the point of even sleeping if I can't show it off? And
Hmm.
I this is going to be like, I think, a major. I'm really interested to see how that impacts our psychology as we age and as we like look back on the social media era.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know. Things just feel like they're spinning up right now, which we've talked about before. But
Yeah.
it's hard to imagine social media working as it does today 10 years from now.
Yeah. It just does not seem feasible. I will say also, if anyone has not yet listened to Bo Burnham's Inside,
Oof.
I think one of, I think, the best pieces of art coming out of the pandemic specifically, but I think
Yeah.
in relation to listening to Bo's Inside and playing American Arcadia and thinking about Trevor has some really interesting parallels that I've been thinking about as well.
Oof.
So just something, if you want to revisit that, if you haven't, or if you haven't yet listened to it. It's different because Bo Burnham intentionally became a content creator, but I think there's some questions that Trevor asks later on, and that Vivian also brings up that really tie into some of the themes that Bo Burnham addresses in his album. So cool
I think
stuff.
that idea of consciously putting yourself in this situation is something that we're
Mhm.
going to get into with old Arcadia.
Mhm.
Because we talked a bit about this, like if you knew what Arcadia was, like, would you join in? And I think they really force you as an audience to consider that. I'm appreciative of that.
Yeah. So we get away from that leaked footage and we take control of the car with Trevor in it. But actually, Trevor quickly gets to the border where that jingle happens and he is unable to keep driving. So Angela has to take over the car, get him over sort of that line. Which I was like, how do we know that he's not going to die? Like, there's only a certain amount of pain I feel like a human can take. We don't know what
Mm.
this is doing to him. Like, oh my
You
gosh.
know what signaled to me that he wouldn't die was the directionality of the speakers. I think
Ah.
if the speakers if they had been on both sides of the poles, so that
Mhm.
whether you were coming or going, it was going to be affecting you. For me,
Mhm.
that would have signaled like, you will not escape this. Having it so that they stopped, I don't know. For me, it kind of seemed like this is going to be really bad, but it's not
Mm.
going to be lethal. And I don't know why that is, but it did. I did
Interesting.
take note of that as he was driving.
Yeah, that's a really interesting detail, and also dang, because it's like I'm glad they didn't put that because yeah, it kind of assumes a different, maybe a different intent, I guess, or a
Mm,
definite different intent on the side of the producers of the show and the people managing this thing.
right.
Um, we cut to Javert, which, okay, in the VO, at least twice he calls himself Javert, and I was
Javert.
like, no. I'm sorry. You are
I
Javert.
refuse.
I refuse. Like, this what? So I'm sorry to everyone who is like, he says in the VO it's Javert. I cannot do it. I'm sorry. It's Javert.
It's Javert. For us, it's Javert.
It just has to
Apologies.
be. Um, yeah, I think we then cut to there's a car accident. We cut to a really quick footage of Trevor and the producer or the camera person kind of being like, "Well, we didn't see this crash." And Trevor mentions there's a lot you didn't see. And I thought that was a really nice little detail bec-
Brilliant.
because we are reminded once again that this whole thing is being broadcast, but there is still editing happening to the viewers.
It's really strange because all of this story is kind of being told to us through flashback,
Yes.
right? Like Trevor is telling his story, Angela is telling her story, but we are playing it in the context of someone who's experiencing it for the first time. I think it's a really interesting detail as a part of this.
Mhm.
I thought it was odd that they didn't show the car crash to us either in that moment. Like I actually wrote down like why the car crash happens off screen. Like it really surprised me.
Mm.
But when he says we didn't see that, it helped me realize that maybe even the stuff we are playing, at least for part, is the edited version of what
Yep.
happened. But then again, we go to some parts that I mean, we don't know yet, but I'm assuming are not going to get broadcast.
Right. Yeah, I kind of from the developer perspective, I was like, probably saving on some animation there. But
Ah,
yeah, I think narratively, I also lean towards this is edited. Like, again, I still feel like there's an element of we are watching the documentary or like the post-show recap of like or retrospective of what happened during this historical event.
I love that.
And, like, hopefully it's in a world where maybe, I like, Vivian still seems to have power because we know she was referenced in the interview about how she, like, denied allegations. So it's like, maybe Walton still has some semblance of power, but maybe there's more contesting of that power happening because of what happened, and that's what this maybe documentary is about.
This to me is the most you have raised what to me is the biggest mystery of the show of the game so far, which is how are we watching a kind of
Mhm.
sanitized documentary about this at the same time that Vivian is denying any like wrongdoing or whatever?
Right.
How can both of those worlds exist? I've got to assume that means there's someone else at the helm now that's kind of like pulling the strings to make this documentary happen. But to
Mhm.
me, I am so curious to see where that goes.
Yeah, same. So we have crashed, and I will say this is the chase sequence that caused me the most grief. The first
Aha.
section of it was fine.
Yeah.
Running, jumping, it actually flashes back. Essentially, it's a callback and sort of a full circle moment because we start where we actually began in the very beginning of the game, which I
Right.
think is really fun.
Love that.
Um, there's a section in this chase sequence where there's like a copter like shooting at you from above, going back and forth.
Yep.
It took me I actually kind of just stopped counting. I'm sure it was probably under 20, but definitely over 10 tries because I could not figure out initially the perspective. Like the swooping back and forth did not register in my brain for the longest time. And then I was like, oh, it's coming at it from different sides and I have to just be on the opposite side. Cool. I'm sure I'll be done with this in a second. Nope. Then I was like, I can't jump up on this thing. That took me forever, realizing, oh, you have to get this pulley that you were supposed to jump up on.
And you're wondering, like, okay, did I time this wrong, or is there something that I'm missing?
Yeah.
And how many times? I bet I played through that like 3 or 4 times, trying to jump backwards, seeing if like there's something I'm supposed to be doing right here before I
Yeah.
finally realized there was a hand cart back there that you could be moving
My
forward.
gosh, drove me up the wall. So I get the handcart and I'm like, certainly, this is gonna be it. I'm gonna be able to coast through the rest because you can feel that this is near the end of that scene. Like you're so close to
Hmm.
finishing the chase. I'm like, I just need to make it to the next check mark because we're close. We're there.
Hmm.
you have to basically jump on the handcart to get onto a building. A there's a blocker sort of section in the building that you're supposed to get to. It took me ages to get there, or a couple tries at least. And then you're supposed to slide down the building and continue running. And there's like 2 or 3 more places to hide in between. For whatever reason, the timing of that just eluded me a few more tries, and by the end of it, I was just like, "I just need to finish this chase scene." I think I was at the point that you were with the cleaning scene with Angela. I was just done by this point. I was like,
Yep.
just not having it.
Time for a break.
Yep, I needed a break. I was like, "I am very excited. I love this game, but I think my biggest problem with any puzzle platformer, because this is a hallmark of the genre in a negative way. If you have to do something more than 2 times, like 3 times is my absolute max. If I have to do it twice, though, that's when I start feeling like I wish you need to signal better. You need to be able to show me what's going on so I can quickly do something, react to it, and feel like I'm on the edge of the chase the entire time. That's the best feeling. And they have it in some other areas, which is why I found this very frustrating.
I 100% agree with this. And this actually happens a couple of times as a part of that chase. You mentioned the
Yep.
helicopter. There's one where like you run at a different pace than some of the people that are chasing you. Some of them are faster, some of
Mm,
them are slower. And so you can't always tell, like, is this person catching me because I'm missing a puzzle element,
mm,
or are they catching me because they're just faster than, like, I can't always tell. And
yeah.
then there were times where I was like, I honestly cannot see a way forward. I must be supposed to get captured here. And then of course you're not.
Yeah.
So
I will say generally the check marks during the chase scene seemed pretty fair. Like I never felt like I got
yeah,
bumped back too far, but it was just, and I think again, I think these sections are more painful partially because the rest of the game feels so polished. And so
I
it
think
just
that's
becomes
right.
just extra noticeable for me.
Hmm.
But yeah, so there's the chase scene. I was not feeling it, but we get to the edge of like we're at the edge of the dome, but the bridge doesn't go all the way. We need Angela to like finish the bridge from the other side.
Brutal. Oh,
Um
absolutely brutal.
and Trevor surrenders and like a cop, Javert and his minion still shoot Trevor and stun him anyways. So that's great. A cab, just as a
A
reminder.
cab. Yep.
And we end up inside the hexagon and we get another nice little flashback. Or I guess
Yes.
documentary kind of propaganda advertisement movie.
Taking us into the city of tomorrow.
Mhm.
I thought this was a really interesting approach to remind you of kind of the military industrial complex
Yeah.
that is behind a lot of the systems of power, especially in America.
Mhm.
America. Uh, I thought even the use of a hexagon,
Yep.
uh, which is obviously very reminiscent of a pentagon, just like shape wise.
Yep.
I thought there was like some really interesting. It was a great way to give us a quick sense of like, however bad you feel, it's going to be worse, and it really signaled to me as in the audience like like big brother, like whatever words you want to use here, like there's some real power and violence behind what you are experiencing.
Mhm. Yeah, I think I really appreciate your mention. And glad you brought up the military industrial complex because I think what in our own world as well as in this game, it's very easy to initially just be like, oh, it's the companies. The companies are doing this. It's just the capitalists. And like capitalism is at play in the military. But I think the idea that this is a deeper power struggle and a deeper problem than simply entertainment companies that want money. This is something that like the government and the military are backing in a certain way. I think that is really important and really telling. I think part of me, this whole game is like, okay, I'm willing to suspend my disbelief and be like, yeah, this law is going to be put into play. The Burbank Act, it's like, what entertainment company could put an act like the Burbank Act into place? And it's like, well, I still there's an element of suspending your disbelief there, but I am much more readily able to say like, ah, if there's something in it for the military, for the government to be able to benefit from this, I know it's far-fetched, but honestly,
Not that
not
far-fetched.
that. Yeah, I
I
was like,
mean,
I can
didn't
see it.
Disney just announce the Disney Town like a
Yeah.
year or two ago? The
Yep.
like they're building a home community, and
Mhm.
like it was it was actually around this time that like I first thought about that as like, oh wait a second, like
Mhm.
not only is this possible, like we're a few cameras away from it being real.
Yeah, and it's, like, not to the level of Burbank Act government, but we have also had company towns, that's what they are, they
Sure.
existed,
Yep.
where it's like these company towns were made with their own currency, with their own, like, law enforcement, so forms of
Yep.
this have existed, um, and I can see a world in which like the blending of company towns, capitalism, and reality TV. I can see unfortunately see a world that in the future, if we let it go unchecked, have it happen. Actually, I this is super dark. I haven't watched it because I think it's completely unethical from and I want to read a bit more about it, but Netflix actually just announced a show. I think it's just begun called Unlocked, I think. Um I'll have to look it up. I'm looking it up right now just so I can
Uncharted, the life of Nate Drake.
no. Um Yes. Okay. It's called Unlocked, a Jail Experiment. Let me just read the Netflix
Uh-uh.
synopsis for you. At an Arkansas detention facility, a sheriff implements a radical social experiment to grant men who are incarcerated more agency in this reality series. They are filming a reality series in a prison. And
No. Mm-mm.
like, again, I need to do a little bit more research on this. But I just even just that sentence in itself, they're filming a reality TV show in a prison, which they've had other reality TV shows in prisons. I think that's highly unethical. Um, and the fact
Yes,
that
like, what agency do you have as an individual in a prison system? I don't like it.
exactly,
I don't
exactly,
like it.
and I feel like there's a lot to unpack with that, and again, I'm bringing it up just because I saw it in the news, and I haven't had the chance to look into it, so perhaps next week I'll be able to share more details, but, like, this stuff is kind of like, not again, not to the extent of American Arcadia, but we are seeing hints of this happen, and it's not
Wow.
cool. It's not cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oof.
So I think when I look at this and I'm like, ah, it could never like American Arcadia's science fiction could never happen. I think maybe not to this specific extent. Maybe the science of like the visiorama doesn't actually work, or maybe that
Yeah,
element isn't true. But
sure.
I think the themes that they're getting at are very relevant to today.
Yeah, I totally agree with that take, Jenny. I'm just it's almost shocking how much of this is real, you
Hmm.
know? Like it feels like such an outlandish thing on its face, but when you really start picking it apart, you're like, wait, well, that kind of exists over in this pocket, and that kind of exists over in this pocket, and that's not great. That's kind of a scary sign for
I
sure.
know. So we learn about the hexagon, and I think what again a chilling slogan, but they say the dome, core, and hexagon, the lungs, heart, and brain of Arcadia. So we learn a bit of useful lore at least because we know
Hmm.
now the three parts that allow this to function. So hopefully, if we can eliminate one of those or two of those, we can maybe ruin Arcadia and dismantle it from within.
Yes, and we kind of go from there into a lot of big twists and reveals almost
Yes.
immediately. You wake up as Trevor in custody. You hear the phrase, "He's not a person; he's property," which is just like, my God, like,
Yep.
I mean, I know that slavery still exists in America and elsewhere, but like, hearing something put so boldly like that as like a truism was chilling.
Mhm.
Um, we see Gus alive. Vivian explains that, oh no, like people who get taken out go to the edge and live in like this different community. I don't believe it.
Mm-mm.
I don't trust it.
It's a little bit
There's something else
suspicious.
going on here. Uh, we he gets told we can't keep you here against your will after them violently chasing him down for days and then them essentially locking him into an interrogation room where there's basically an NDA that's like, if you sign this, we'll take you to the realignment booth and then set you up in this really nice posh place
Mhm.
on the edge.
Mhm.
And it was just like such a devious, like, again, we talk about power structures, like this type of thing happens, like the kind of
Mhm.
like high levels of power that put NDAs in front of people in a way that's actually not, it's you actually don't have a lot of control over whether or not you sign. And it's like, we're locking you in this room and hopefully you have a man in the chair, as they say, who's on the outside that can play don't be a fool and keep you from signing, because otherwise, yikes, it's brutal out there.
It is. And I'll have to be sure to link it into the newsletter this week along with like a bunch of other resources, but I think in terms of bringing us into the real world and some of the actual implications that reality TV show contestants have had to are continuously working through and fighting for is these rights to not have these incredibly coercive and restrictive, and in some cases, they're arguing unconstitutional, like NDAs, contracts that basically give away rights to, in some regards, like safety for these contestants,
Oof.
mental health protection. So I think the reality TV show that got this going the most, I think, was Love is Blind, when a few of the contestants after participating in the show said, A, they were withholding sunlight, withholding water, and only giving us alcohol, withholding food, to create situations in which people were not in their best mental state and not able to make the best decisions or be the best versions of themselves. This is also very dangerous, I mean, for obvious reasons. And so after the show, and I think even now, a bunch of these reality stars have gotten together and are trying to push for legislation that protects people who participate in these kind of
Oh, cool.
broadcasts. So I'll link to some resources if anyone wants to read more about that, because I think it's really interesting because reality shows are not new. They have been around for a long time, since the 70s, 80s, I would say. It's kind of shocking we don't have any like the protections because they're not considered actors. They're not like
Hmm.
unionized. So studios are able to get away with a lot with them.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, everything like the last reality show I was really into was Terrace House, and
Mm-hmm.
they stopped filming that after one of the, at least as far as I know, after one of the contestants, I suppose, ended up taking her own life. And
Mm-hmm.
I just, it is hard to imagine what it is like to have your life put on screen and for you to know how people are perceiving you constantly. Um, I mean, I guess streamers are kind of living in this world to a large degree now, that like you,
Mm,
especially the larger you get, the more you're seeing how people perceive you. That sounds really tough to me. That's not like, it's one thing to be in Arcadia and have no concept that you're being perceived or how
right.
people perceive you. The idea that that people are doing it, are perceiving you in these ways, and that you know it, man, that would fuck me up. I I wouldn't
Yeah.
be able to take that.
Yeah. It's incredibly challenging. I think and I think people aren't even necessarily prepared for like being perceived in that way on small scales, and the fact that
Mm.
we're exposing people to like worldwide attention without any sort of preparation or support can be very dangerous, depending on the person especially.
This
So
is actually, it's almost a perfect transition,
yeah.
because it is immediately after this point where he hears the jingle, "Don't be a fool," that we learn
Yep.
that clips of Trevor running have been released, and Six claims that they're responsible for doing it. And
Yeah.
so we are immediately in this place of like, wait a minute. Someone is now using these materials as a way to draw attention to the situation, which has potential benefits and potential huge drawbacks. And
Mhm.
it's impossible to guess which way that's going to go.
Yep. Uh, yeah, and in this, we learn because Angela is talking to Six, and Six is the one who flags this broadcast to Angela and says, "Turn on the TV. These clips are out." Takes responsibility and says, "We were the ones who leaked these clips." Notable for later. And Angela eventually suggests in this phone conversation that they should just go to the Hexagon and try to free Trevor. And so this begins a really, I thought, kind of fun section. Um, of sneaking into the hexagon and sort of crawling through the vents, listening in
Yeah,
on
I
a
like
couple
this a lot.
meetings, solving a few like tile switching puzzles, and really just trying to get close to or get into the realignment room.
I love that. I This is one of my favorite parts of the game so far is
Mm-hmm.
managing through. Is this also when you are taking advantage of the drones?
I think this is right. I think this is after. I feel like.
There's a
Let me look at my
part
note. Because
where
yeah.
he's been running, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so you start eavesdropping on conversations, and at a certain point, like you help Trevor escape and get
Yep.
out of the room, right? And one of the things that I thought was fucking hilarious is I want to say it was when you're hacking the drones, you overhear the officers talking about Dan, because Dan
Oh,
like broke his arm
yeah.
or his leg or something like that
He
during the
broke his leg.
chase.
Yeah.
Broke his leg. And they say there's like a sign, like there's a sign on the wall that's like
Mhm.
justice for Dan, or smash
Yeah. Smash
smash
his
mustache
mustache.
for Dan. Oh, which is so funny, and also like a reminder of how like the perpetrators of violence will often play the victim,
Mhm.
etc., etc. But I thought, first of all, that this kind of spy shit, like crawling around, was so fun. I thought the drone sequence was a lot of fun.
Mhm.
Puzzles made sense. I enjoyed them, and then also like some of those little like moments of conversation I thought were really enjoyable.
Yeah, I completely agree. I love it when we get to be in the world and we get to overhear things. Something about it brings just a lot of delight to me. I love eavesdropping in games, and I think one of my favorite sections was also when you're on the phone with Six, and you actually learn that Four is with Six, which is kind of interesting. But I guess they're driving away, and they went too fast, and Six is like, "I told you not to speed, number four," and he's just like, or I guess we don't know. There's a voice changer. And Six is like, just pull over and just act normal. And I thought that was really funny. So we got little sort of funny moments like that, which again also just illuminated Six and Four, at least from the Arcadia Six, are both in cahoots, still working together.
Yes. And I guess speaking of, this kind of gets us to our last chapter, right? You kind of make your
Hmm.
way through here. You've infiltrated the puzzle, and you get to a wonderful tomorrow to live in. That's the last
Yes.
chapter. And this is a huge section. Like I feel like is a lot of stuff happens in this
Hmm.
piece for both characters.
Hmm.
Um, you get to walk into old Arcadia as Trevor, and when we talk about earlier, kind of the idea of if you know you're being recorded, or if you knew that life would be this way, like would you want to join? On the back billboard, there's this whole line about like it's a gilded cage. Basically, the Six have acknowledged, well, I guess we don't know for sure that they kill people, but we still know that this is wrong, and
Yeah.
uses the landscape of old Arcadia to call out kind of the intrinsic problems with living in this world. I thought that was brilliant. Like
Mhm.
using an environment from this old Arcadia to tell that story, and like from a perspective of someone who's like been there as far as we know. I just thought that was like a really creative way to help Trevor understand that this is not just like you sign a piece of paper and now you get to go live happily ever after. Like this
Mhm.
place does not have your best interest in mind. I thought that was a really, really like creative way to tell that story.
Yeah, and I think this section of the game, the section of the chapter is one of my favorites for a couple of reasons. Because the next scene we get with Trevor got me choked up. I cried a little. Because Trevor is walking through old Arcadia. We see Kovacs's, like the original Kovacs's recording studio, which was one of his favorite shows as he was growing up and maybe even as an adult in terms of nostalgia. And he talks about how he loved the music, and he sits down and he starts playing this beautiful song on the
Yes.
piano.
Yes.
And what I loved so much about this moment in the game is that there was no voiceover, no dialogue, no camera really like movement except for this slow panning in to just like to let Trevor have his like this is his moment, and especially
Mm-hmm.
coming from a character who has this whole time been told you're not interesting enough, your life, whoever you are, not worth watching, paying attention to, caring about. I was like, oh, oh, it was so good. It just like hit me in my just soul. Oh, so good. It's my favorite moment in the game so far.
Can I let's add to that
Yeah.
because the conversation between him and Angela after that just kind
Yes.
of added more and more spice to that scene for me.
Yep.
Like she asked like what he'd like to do. And the first thing that she recommends is like, "Oh, you could be like a musician." And it's like, "Oh, so your idea, Angela, is the first thing that comes to mind when you
Yes.
see this point of interest is that you should monetize it, you should make it public so that it's for other people."
Yep.
And it's like Trevor says this thing not in response to this directly, but it feels
Mhm.
like connected to me about how he really appreciated his quiet and peaceful life,
Yes. I
and
screenshot that.
ugh, it's like he can play music just for himself,
Yep.
and that's okay. And I think it's the first time that we see Trevor grapple with almost hurt and anger that his life that he values, that he likes, is just not considered interesting enough for it to be worth keeping.
Yeah. Yeah, he says, "My life may not be interesting, but I don't deserve this." And he says something along the like, "I'm a good person. Just, like, let me live." That to me, I think more than any like, more than even some of the discussions we've had on, like, reality TV and sort of,
Hmm.
like, all of this other
Hmm.
stuff around it, I think this for me is the core of the game, is this idea of, like, just people at their core, you don't need to be interesting to be of value. Like, that for me, ugh, ugh. I sat with that scene, and, like, after the dialogue finished, like, I kind of sat there and, like, I didn't move Trevor because I just needed to sit with that so much because um I think that's why I got so frustrated when you were like, "He's such a sad sack," and I was like, "I adore Trevor." Like, just let him live. And I think that kind of like, not that you were telling, I think you were saying it kind of in jest, but I think there's this element of like, what if he was just happy being quiet and alone, and like maybe he just loved being with his turtle
Hmm.
and going to work and coming home and watching TV. Like maybe that was his happy place. Why can't that be enough?
I love this. because it also, this idea of like, what does it mean for you to be happy and satisfied with your situation? You immediately go from this very touching scene with like true depth into Angela learning about the jingle
Mhm.
and learning that brands have inserted themselves into the jingle in such a way that, and this is my interpretation of this, so I'd love if I got
Yeah.
this wrong. My interpretation is that in some ways, those brands and the jingle itself is altering how a person experiences their life.
Yeah.
Like he talked about, like when when they showed the dance hall, I can't remember what it's called, as a part of
Mhm.
this jingle, how like within his brain waves, essentially, like that induces fear in him. And so it was just like, well, is Trevor even like living the life
Yeah.
that he would be living free of this jingle, or has the jingle foundationally informed his interests, his
Yeah.
habits? Uh, I
I
mind blown.
know. Well, and that's the thing, and I think where I really felt weird because I didn't expect to feel necessarily conflicted, but I started to feel uncomfortable with the fact that the solution that Angela and Six came up with was okay. Well, we know there's this realignment jingle that's being used on the citizens of Arcadia.
Hmm.
Um, the four phrases that the company uses is their only aspiration must be routine, the absolute suppression of self-control, we need to strengthen each and every fear, and this requires a distortion in their perception of freedom. This is how they're being kept controlled. And so Angela and Six say, we need to create the anti jingle. We're just going to like basically contrast everything of this sort of four pillar, you know, structure that they have to make Trevor want like accept freedom and aspire to be like free. Um there is a part of me that's like it almost feels like they're doing it's like doing the same thing almost in reverse. It's like how could we get Trevor to think on his own terms for himself, because I feel like this programming of him to want to be free feels almost like the same thing from the other side of the coin. Like he is not given that opportunity to be reprogrammed necessarily. Like they're telling him he's going to be reprogrammed so the jingle's removed. He's not being told that the jingle is actually being countered by an anti-jingle that may implement different ideas into his head.
Oh, that's interesting. Because you know, one of the things I wrote down is when you actually go through like the mental process, you go to this like
Mhm.
dream sequence where Trevor is essentially being reprogrammed. You as Trevor in
Yeah.
this like mental space hit the buttons to do the reprogramming. And so I thought that was like an interesting way to show that like Trevor's being given some agency over. But if he's not told that this is just a different type of programming,
Right.
he's not being given that agency. It's another illusion of agency.
Right. And so that's why this is where I was like I felt conflicted because
Oof.
part of me like I had two sort of ranges and I'm like depending on how the rest of the game plays out, we'll see what happens. But the skeptical part of me is wondering, is this reprogramming still not giving him the agency he deserves? Um the hopeful part of me is I maybe took that too seriously and it is giving him back agency, because again when you play through it does feel like, oh, you're going through like the mindscape, you go
Hmm.
into this sort of really surreal place where all of the sort of the four aspirations and fears are being addressed, and maybe it is, and I'm just being very skeptical, but part of me is just like I don't trust Six, and I think the
Hmm.
next sequence we see reinforced my lack of trust in what Six has in store for Trevor. Um, and that's where I'm still suspicious, and I'm hoping I'm wrong. I'm hoping that I'm just being skeptical, and actually Trevor is fine, and he has been anti-jingled, and that means he's actually able to make his own choices. But I am skeptical of that.
You have just completely invalidated one of my moments of hope at the end of this at the end of this
No,
chapter,
no, be hopeful. Oh my God.
because my hope was he comes out of the jingle, right? Out of
Yeah.
being reprogrammed in a very literal sense, like programmed differently.
Mm-hmm.
And he essentially makes what I perceived to be his first choice with agency in the game, where he essentially says, instead of getting out, I'm going to go back and try and free everyone.
Yes.
And I took that to be he has agency. He's not doing what the others are saying. However, if he's been programmed differently, and we know that Six is right after this, we learn some nefarious piece here. It is very possible that he is making this decision to go back and save the others in Arcadia because he has been programmed to do so.
Yeah.
That
Again,
sucks.
right. And that's what,
Maybe,
again,
maybe.
maybe because I saw it both ways. I saw it the way that you just described it in terms of, oh my gosh, not only is he hoping to free himself, but he actually really and I think genuinely Trevor is a good person. I don't think you can
Yeah,
program like his personality. I think he does care about the people of Arcadia.
yeah,
Um
totally.
I think again, I just it's so hard for me to definitively say at this point what part is Trevor, what part is like the jingle, what part's the anti-jingle, and like where does Six's intentions lie amidst all this?
Mm,
Because I think that is the biggest question I've had. We've from day one, we were like, who is Six? We don't know. Angela just kind of goes and trusts this person on the phone, but we know Angela is not the best covert activist, direct action person ever. Angela does not practice a lot of the safety needed for this kind of work.
you.
Um, and so I think the reason why we are suspicious, we'll say this just to like officially say it, close it out, is after the reprogramming, we essentially cut to we cut to footage of Arcadia Live's reveal, the reveal of the app and the current iteration of what we see Arcadia being today, which is this everyone is able to participate, vote, look at the app, see the results. It's live all the time. We then cut to Trevor's live feed. He has gone from having one follower, which is Angela, to having over 1 million. Angela has gotten a notification because she's the one who's watching his, like, who's responsible for his citizen grid. And she says something along the lines of, how did so many people know how to follow him and where to follow him? And the only person who knew where Trevor was and could potentially leak the location of, sort of where to follow him, uh, is Six and Agents
Yep.
of Breakout. So, this idea that Six has Trevor's best interest in mind is now a little bit under suspicion because
Yeah.
also earlier in the game, we didn't mention this, but Six also called Trevor an asset.
Mm-hmm.
It was after that emotional piano moment, and Six said something to Angela like, really great how you handled that. Trevor's going to be a great asset. And Angela was the one who called out Six and said, don't
Yeah.
call him that. He's a person.
I thought this was, again, just really brilliantly done.
Hmm.
It also happens hot on the heels of the announcement of the new American Arcadia app.
Yeah.
All of this timing is just super sus.
Right.
And
Well,
I,
the American Arcadia app, that was like 2009 footage. So that was like in the past.
oh, interesting. So they're
Yeah.
just like showing that to remind us. Okay, cool, cool.
Yeah.
Well, that's makes sense then.
Yeah.
It's just what, again, like I keep coming back to like who benefits from Trevor going on this run to try and get free? Who
Hmm.
benefits from uh, potentially the freeing or awakening of American Arcadia the participants?
Hmm.
Loose bad word there. Subjects probably is the better word. Um, and how is Vivian able to like have this happen? And I just can't keep. I have to keep coming back to like. It feels like there's someone waiting in the wings, maybe, that is
Hmm.
doing this to disrupt the company so that they can take over.
Yeah. I forget what the phrase actually is, but it's something about like following the money. And I feel like, especially because we've had budgets mentioned quite often throughout this
Mm.
game about how
Hmm.
American Arcadia is not seeing a lot of profit. It's
Yep.
down in its trends. Part of me is wondering where we will find the money, because I think that's where we will find some of the answers, at least.
Yep. Totally agreed. There's gotta be one more layer here, is what I'm thinking.
Yep.
So
And we will find that layer next week. Next week is the last week of playing our American Arcadia as a crew together. We will be, let's see, yeah, we will be hanging out on Saturday, April 27th in the Discord if you wanted to show up for sort of the month-long recap discussion of American Arcadia. It is a full spoiler discussion. Excuse me. So please be aware of that if you do come in, that we will be talking about everything and anything that's related to the game. But if you wanted to come, even if you didn't finish the game and you're okay with hearing spoilers, that's totally fine. We just want to hang out and enjoy each other's company for a little bit and enjoy the fact that we all played this game together. I think that is it for housekeeping.
thank you so much for joining us at Geeks and Grounds, everyone. I hope for you this week that you are able to find a little something just for yourself that you don't have to put on display for everyone. And then, of course, do get in the comments and let us know what that thing is.
Yes. We'll see you all next week.
Bye.
Bye.